Hello YouTube, my name is Courtney and welcome to Courtney and Books, where I talk about anything and everything involving books and sometimes other things. I am having a day. I just dropped my camera and my mouse. The mic fell off of my camera, which is fine, I wasn't using it anyways. I already recorded this video and then the format of the video changed mid-recording and then it wasn't compatible with my computer. It is incredibly hot outside, which I don't know why. It is still winter, right? Am I right? I know I'm in Arizona, but still, why is it so dang hot in Arizona? I have all of the windows open because I refuse to put my AC on in the winter. Okay, today I am touching on a topic that I honestly didn't think I was going to talk about. Now, I don't want to make this channel about drama. I want to stay positive here, but I wanted to talk about this specific topic because it seems to be something that people refuse to forget about. You know, drama usually happens and then it gets brushed aside, and after the initial backlash, people sort of move on to the next. This particular thing just keeps popping back up on my radar, and that is the Milo Winter drama. So a couple of other videos have been released covering the most recent news about Milo, but I'm not really going to talk about that. I don't know everything that's happening now, and I'd rather not keep a super close eye on it because, like I said, this channel wasn't created to cover drama and controversy. And hopefully you can't hear my fan that I just turned on. I'm so hot right now. I'm so sweaty. It's a beautiful day out. It's super cloudy, so I don't know why it's so hot. The heat is getting to me. The reason I want to talk at all about this whole thing is because the way something like this could affect the indie community. If you know absolutely nothing about Milo, the Milo Winter drama, here is a really quick rundown. Milo Winter is a fantasy author formerly known as Audra Winter, aka the creator of World of Guardian, a fantasy universe that revolves around a magic system based on the zodiac signs. First book was released a few months ago and is called The Age of Scorpius. So why is Milo Winter in the spotlight? Because before the book's release, Milo had accumulated a pretty large following on TikTok. People were anticipating the release of this book sometime before the book was actually released. He built up a lot of hype, and the idea of a magic system based on the zodiacs was very unique, and people were just generally excited. He also, from my understanding, hired a lot of artists to create art and illustrations for his books, and in fact, focused so much on the artwork that people were already kind of suspecting his priorities were a little out of order. I guess during this time, he also had an agent for the book, and that agent then dropped him, so he started a pity marketing campaign to garner more attention. If you don't know what a pity marketing campaign is, it's basically exactly what it sounds like. Guys, I'm really having I'm having a hard time, and I don't know, I'm ruined. See this shirt? See, I did the artwork for this shirt, and you can actually go on my website and you can buy this shirt, and every shirt that you get helps me out so much. If like 10 of you went to my website and you bought this shirt, it would support me, and I would be able to eat my breakfast tomorrow morning. So I don't even know where I am. This isn't my house, and I just, you know, if you guys could give me money, it would mean a lot to me. So people get on camera, they shed some tears, they talk about how hard things are, and then they proceed to market whatever they're trying to market. In this case, it was the book. And it's basically using your audience's pity and charity kind of against them, to be honest. A lot of people think it's in poor taste. A lot of people in the Milo Winter case thought it was very much in poor taste, but it didn't stop Milo from continuing to build a larger audience. Shortly after, he began referring to himself as an entrepreneur and began talking about his books like a company rather than a story, stating that he had a team of artists and editors that were working for him to build the World of Guardian. Now, books are a business, and if you want to make a living off of them, you should treat them as a business. But the way Milo treated his book was disconnected, and people started to notice. Repeatedly in Milo's videos, he talked about starting this book when he was 12, and he published when he was 22, so that's 10 years roughly, and that's not unheard of. This book right here is one of the first books that I published, and this took me roughly about 10 years to write. A lot of authors take more time than that. George R.R. Martin, we're looking at you. So I'm not criticizing that at all. But Milo stated that he was 12 when he created this world, and that will be significant in just a moment. Anyways, like I said, he seemed to be getting more and more disconnected from the book, and it seemed to be more about the team working with him than the book itself. He stated many times that he had a team of 15 artists for the book. The editor for Hunger Games was editing it for him. And he also started to flaunt that he was a And he also started to flaunt that he was a six-figure business owner, and all of this was following his pity marketing campaign where he mostly talked about how ruined he was. So it was kind of all over the place from the very beginning. But this didn't stop him from getting over 6,000 pre-orders on TikTok Shop before the book's actual release. That is wild. There's a lot of traditional authors that don't even get that number in pre-orders. So that's a huge number, especially for an indie author. When the books went out, people were very disappointed. I did not read the book myself, but I did glimpse the first page where a grammatical error is literally just staring you right in the face within the first like 2 or 3 sentences. That is not the best start to a book thousands of people have been anticipating and thousands of people have spent money on. And I don't think that this book that they bought was cheap. It was like a special edition hardcover that people were pre-ordering, so it was not cheap. To quote multiple readers who actually did read the book was pretty much unreadable. The errors were many, cohesion was non-existent, the story was sketchy, and the world was underdeveloped. I have dog hair all over me. I apologize. I'm a little bit of a mess today. In short, people felt lied to. I mean, Milo claimed the editor for The Hunger Games edited this book, but it seemed evident that there wasn't even an editor at all once the book was actually in people's hands. Later, the statement about the editor turned out to be a very stretched version of the truth. Many readers stated that they didn't think there was an editor at all, and that the book read like a first draft. Of course, when you pre-order a special edition hardcover, you want your book to be polished, and people just didn't get what they wanted. People started wanting refunds, which in my opinion, just because you don't like the product, I mean, you bought it. Sorry, it sucks, but shit happens sometimes. Other people were saying that it was all a scam, which I also don't believe. I believe a lot of authors get attached to their work and they think it's the best thing in the world. And so I genuinely think that Milo thought this book was at its best and perhaps didn't listen to his supposed team that was standing behind him. I think he later stated in response to people's claims that the book wasn't edited that he actively didn't accept any of the changes that his editor suggested, which if that's true, that's a very poor decision on his part. So after over 6,000 people received their books, the backlash started to pour in, nay, flood in. I think it's currently sitting at a 1.5 stars on Goodreads. And this is after, I guess, Goodreads started removing a lot of reviews under suspicion that they were not genuine and that they were there to bully the author. Or maybe Goodreads thought the book was getting review bombed, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically when a book has an onslaught of 1-star reviews, usually by people who have not read the book, but instead have some kind of beef with the author themselves over political views, their personal life drama, or beliefs on current events, or literally anything that has nothing to do with the actual contents of the book in question. Personal note, this trend is abhorrent, and in an actual case where a book is getting review bombed because of something unrelated to the book, I do think that's something that Goodreads should put a stop to. And if you've ever review bombed a book, shame on you. Get a life. If you don't like an author, then that's on you. You don't have to support them. You don't have to read their book, but just get over it. I think that's such a stupid trend, and it's along the lines of like the online like social media witch hunts, which I will never agree with. I've seen it happen so many times with people I know, with people I don't know, and it just gets so many people involved that shouldn't be involved, and we should have evolved past that by now, but apparently we haven't. I think humans are actually devolving. Anyways, completely different topic. Let's move on. So let's read some of Milo's reviews. This is a 1-star review. WTF, my review was removed. It was a construct criticism with clear examples from the book, so clearly I didn't hate on it just for the sake of it. This is another 1-star review. A disclaimer first. Goodreads, you told me in the email where you took this down for the second time that this review meets your community guidelines. So you're the one making these reviews look fixed. Stop removing reviews you admit to our faces are acceptable by your platform standards. I read the full sample online and good Lord, there's no amount of we'll fix it in post that can make this better. These aren't simple errors, and Winter needs to not insult us other neurospecies by acting like the characters, I don't know if I pronounce that right, by acting like the character's supposed neurodiversity is the reason for the unfocused narrative. And if you don't know, that is one of the excuses that Milo Winter gave when people started criticizing the way the book was written. He did state that the main character was neurodivergent, and that is why it sounded strange when they were like describing things. And clearly people weren't falling for that. There is a distinct lack of tension from the get-go. We're wandering aimlessly around in the woods while people are conveniently hunting the MC, though if we're on the edge, of woods no one dare come into, how did they just know our MC was even there right at the exact time? Why are we worried about runic inscriptions when people are hunting you? Priorities. And this is a problem with the book and its marketing. This isn't a matter of using the wrong word, which happens a lot. This isn't just a matter of awkward punctuation or needing to tighten things up or tighten up some verbs. This is a mess at the core, and that's the problem with rewriting the whole draft with every edit. You're not keeping the stuff that matters, nor actually changing the stuff that needs to be changed. You just wrote a different book over and over. Winter's process, while admirable in its tenacity, is fundamentally flawed. It confuses developmental edits with copy editing with final proofing. It confuses the entire drafting process. It removes all growth and only cares about the bells and whistles of a release. This is a very long review, so bear with me. Also, I did not do this on purpose. This mug and this shirt, I did not do this on purpose. I just grabbed one of the biggest mugs I had because I really wanted a lot of tea, and I was already wearing this shirt, but now I look like a super fan of Ghostface, which I'm not a super fan, but I am a fan. Anyways, and I say this with all the love in the world. No amount of beautiful illustration or sprayed edges changes the core content, the story, and at this point, I think most people who tried to give this a chance care more about the story quality than Winters does. We don't care about additional art. It is not the audience's problem that you're struggling to pay the art team you impulsively hired. All we wanted was a story to care about, the one that was advertised. Seriously, priorities. So again, a little note, if you didn't know, Winter did claim that every time there was an edit, he would rewrite the entire book. And I don't know if he was trying to flex or like thought that was a flex, but in doing that, a lot of people pointed out that when you just rewrite an entire book because of a few edits, then every draft is a first draft. And to a lot of people, this book read as a first draft, and people are speculating that that is the reason, that he just kept rewriting the book over and over and over and over. So this is something I will probably get into in a whole video on its own, but the indie world is starting to prioritize pretty collectible books over quality these days. And I did say this in my my first 2026 video about, like, you know, unpopular opinions about books. I did talk about this a little bit, but books are coming out with new editions every day that will look good on a shelf, but the books themselves are getting worse and worse in terms of content. It's almost like, and there's no nice way to say this, it's like indie authors are compensating for their bad writing by making the exterior of their books more appealing. Personally, I don't buy pretty books. Unless I've read the book already and I know it's good, of course. I think if an author promotes the interior pages, the dust jacket, and the pretty embossed covers that they change almost monthly to make another limited edition to sell for $60 or more, it's a clear sign that maybe the story doesn't speak for itself. I might get a lot of flack for that. Actually, I won't. I'm not a big enough channel to get flack for that. But I've just seen so many books with beautiful exteriors, and the contents has just been beyond disappointing. I'm not talking about all of them. I'm not saying that a good book can't have a beautiful special edition or two, but I think the limited edition thing is creating a lot of fatigue. It's more of a marketing strategy. It's more like capitalizing on this era of, you know, collecting, this era of people who just want to collect pretty things. Again, that's kind of a topic for another video if I decide to do a video on it, but I think I've pretty much made my opinions clear. I don't think I need to make an entire video about it now that I think about it, but anyways, moving on. Back to the reviews. Review bombing is a thing, especially in the current social climate. It has become a trend to review bomb authors without actually reading the books. These kinds of reviews often state dislike for the author rather than a dislike for the book, which is something I completely disagree with. I am here for the stories. I'm not here for the author's drama. I'm not here for any of that. I just want to read good books. You know, reviews are for the books. They're not for the person behind the books. That being said, the reviews for Age of Scorpius did prove to be genuine from readers who actually read the book and likely spent a good chunk of money on the hardcover. So if you go on there right now, a majority of the other reviews are people reposting their reviews after Goodreads allegedly removed them. But from a reader standpoint, I can see why they would be frustrated. People expected something spectacular and got something extremely disappointing. It's one thing to have a bad story that people can't get into. It's another to blatantly release something unpolished, especially after claims of having teams of people behind you and 10 years of perfecting your work. Supposedly, Milo's process of Like I said, supposedly Milo's process of writing involved rewriting the book every time there were edits. Doing this, like I said, means that every draft was a first draft, and that just confuses me so much. The first draft is just full of errors. It's full of mistakes. It's full of continuity mistakes, of grammar mistakes, of spelling mistakes, of, the kind of mistakes you make when you're writing really quickly because you're very inspired and your fingers hit the wrong keys and you just don't care because you're trying to finish a chapter. That's what a first draft usually looks like. And if Milo Winter went back and made every draft a first draft, that is quite ugly from a reader's standpoint. So as an indie author, I want so badly to give Milo Winter the benefit of the doubt, but I don't really know how. Most people know this about me already, but I self-edit. It's a plain fact that I can't afford an editor. They're thousands of dollars, in case you didn't know. And that's an expense that a publisher would usually cover, but for an indie author, we would have to pay for that ourselves, and the expenses would be out of pocket. That being said, I read over my drafts many, many times before releasing them, and even then, I do miss some things. And I read plenty of other books where I find errors here and there. They're usually misspelled words, a missing comma, or something like that, but they're typically pretty minimal. And being an indie author, I am pretty lenient as a reader because I understand the process. But I have said this before, and I'll say it again. If a book reads as a first draft, like many people are claiming this book did, that is, in my opinion, insulting to readers. As a reader, if I do read a book that I just don't think the author has even read over once, I will put it down. Because while I understand a lot of indie authors don't have editors, that means you have to put that extra work in yourself to edit your book to the best of your ability. When a book very obviously did not get that attention, I don't feel like I, as a reader, should give it that attention either. I mean, people pay for these stories. Granted, digital versions aren't usually very much. Every dollar counts, especially to indie authors. It should be our best work, or at the very least, readable. And to then claim that Age of Scorpius took 10 years to perfect, there's really no excuse. I don't want to attack Milo. That's really not what I'm trying to do. Obviously, if he didn't blow up on TikTok, no one would even bat an eye at a bad indie book that was written poorly. It happens way more often than we want. That's not a secret, but usually when an indie book is really bad, it just kind of disappears and it doesn't get popular. Nobody reads it. There's a few bad reviews and then it just sort of sits there gathering dust. But because Milo was built up such a huge following and so much anticipation, it basically made mainstream news in terms of like social media. Indie books are unfortunately a hit or miss, but the general public only heard of this instance because Milo had a few 100,000 followers on TikTok, and so this whole thing was in the spotlight from the beginning. I'm not really going to talk about what happened after this whole incident. I know it put Milo in a very dark place from what he posted on TikTok, and I know he pulled his book from the shelves and has promised to re-release, but I'm not sure what the status of that is, to be honest. I think there was a Patreon where the edits of the original book were put behind a paywall, which people were very upset about. And then Milo disappeared and it's kind of a mess. Again, I'm not a drama channel, so I'm not going to go chasing those answers like some kind of detective. If you want the full tea, there are many other videos out there that go way more in depth, but the reason I covered this story at all is because instances like this unfortunately do have a potential to hurt the indie author community. Now, in the reading community, you have the people who read mainstream books or books that have gone viral. Then you have the people who read indie, and yeah, they probably read mainstream books too, but they read a lot of indie. A large portion of readers do not read indie or lesser known books, either because they don't want to or they genuinely don't know they exist. Most of the time, if they don't want to read them, it's because they don't think they're worth the read. I have heard people express their surprise many times about reading a good book on Kindle Unlimited because Kindle Unlimited is where a lot of the indie authors go. Being surprised to read a good book on Kindle Unlimited is very unfortunate. So if you don't know, Kindle Unlimited is an extension of Amazon Books. It is a subscription for readers, and basically instead of buying books and downloading them, you have the option to pay a certain amount per month in order to rent books, read them, and then return them. This is good for people like me because I read very quickly and I tend to go through a lot of books, and it's a much cheaper option for me. From the author side of things, instead of getting royalties from a download, we also can get royalties from the amount of pages read. This is good because sometimes people can read a portion or sometimes all of your book and then return it, and we as authors lose money. This is a problem on Amazon's end, and they really need to fix it. It's actually quite shitty for authors. And yeah. On Kindle Unlimited, that's not really the case. We get paid per page, even if someone doesn't finish the book. Granted, the royalties are less than if someone buys the book outright, but sometimes we have to weigh the options and choose the lesser of two evils. Either way, we're getting ripped off on Amazon. So yeah, if you could go and read some indie books, we would much appreciate that. We don't get paid a lot at all. Like, at all. So there are pros and cons to being enrolled in Kindle Unlimited as an author, but I won't go too deep into that right now. The point is a lot of indie authors go to Kindle Unlimited because there are more options for promotions. There's more exposure in many cases because Amazon does tend to push Kindle Unlimited more, and we don't have to worry too much about those dreaded returns. Being on Kindle Unlimited doesn't automatically mean a book is bad, but apparently indie authors have built up a reputation. Anyways, instances like what happened with Milo, where an indie author is in the spotlight, promises something spectacular, and releases a bad book, now puts indie authors in an even less flattering light than we were in before. I will be honest, most indie authors are just fighting for their lives out here. It's a very saturated market these days. Anyone can publish a book in whatever state they want to publish it, whether it's been edited by professionals or if it's a first draft. But all those indie works are in the same pool of readers. If they decide to give indie books a chance, they have to sift through that pool to find the gems. For those who regularly read indie works, they expect this. Others might see a bad indie book and immediately think that that's how all indie books are. There is still this idea that you have to have an editor, that you have to have a publisher and an agent and all of that. But many indie books don't have any of those things, and most of the time it's a budget issue. I don't have an editor, I don't have a cover designer, I don't have a promoter, I don't have an agent. I literally do everything myself. Everything about my books is done by me. Formatting, artwork even, I do it all myself, and it's because I'm a broke ass bitch. And I'm not the best writer in the world, but I can honestly say that I work extremely hard to make my books readable. Once more, as a reader, if I do come across a book that clearly has not even been read over once, I do feel insulted, because if you can't afford an editor, who am I to judge? I don't have one. But at least polish it to the best of your ability. Make a good impression, not just for yourself, but for the rest of us. Or at least try. Don't insult readers by giving them the misspelled notes that you jotted down at lunch one day. I personally hope that the Milo Winter drama doesn't steer potential readers from indie works, but sometimes I fear that it only weakens our chances to grow. The internet seems intent on carrying on his name. I just saw a video like yesterday talking about his new poetry book, so the internet is definitely not ready to let him off the hook, which honestly is a little unfortunate. I know there was a lot of drama surrounding unhappy customers, and the fact that Milo pulled the book from the shelves again to be re-edited and then like I said, put the re-edits behind paywalls on his Patreon. So people who already purchased the book would technically have to pay in order to see the edited version. It was a whole mess. It still is a mess. Bad business practices all around. Personally, I would just stay off the internet for a while if I was him, but that's just my 2 cents. Let's get back on track. My favorite books are indie, and I continue to read indie books almost exclusively because I find that when I read mainstream books, they're just too overdone and too similar. They're not original because most mainstream books seem to be written following a sellable formula, and indie books many times will deviate from the formula, and I enjoy that. So I'm here to tell you, please don't stop reading indie books. There are some truly wonderful treasures out there, and I will be doing a video soon with my top 5 indie books that have under 100 reviews, so stay tuned for that. Unfortunately, a lot of these books get buried by stories like this, but they do exist. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. It really helps me out. Tell me what you think about this whole situation in the comments below. And until next time, happy reading or writing. Bye!